All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 411 Ground and Pound MMA podcast. We are your weekly look into the wide, wacky, wonderful world of mixed martial arts. My name is Robert Winfrey, and I am your host, kind of per usual. So, thank you off the bat for tuning in. A lot of MMA related content out there, and I appreciate that I am part of your experience. Whatever you do to enjoy all of this craziness of combat sports. So, thank you. On the agenda this evening, last night the UFC had their last pay-per-view of 2024. It was UFC 310. We'll have a review of that, the good, the bad, the otherwise, and there's some of everything there now that I think about it. Yeah, some of everything there. We also have a preview of the last UFC event of 2024, UFC on ESPN 63. That'll be coming your way on Saturday, so full preview of that. And the news, mostly fight announcements. The UFC has announced over the last week or so UFC 311 and UFC 312. Finalized the main cards. I might have talked about 311 a little bit last week, or it completely skipped my mind. But we have those are the first two pay-per-views of 2025, so they've started to get finalized and kind of get beefed up. So we'll go over what we know about those at the moment. Because 312, they announced both the main and co-main for that last night. So, yeah, that's what we got. And then, of course, any other news that happens to pop up while we're recording. So, anything you can do to help the product, of course, is appreciated. Like, comment, subscribe, star rating, written review. You all know the deal. Okay, let's jump into this, shall we? UFC 310. Last night, decent to good. Decent to good card on paper. Turned out mostly that way in practice. Some baffling First of all, a couple of judges' decisions that are. I'm not going to sit up here and call robbery on any of them. One of them I heartily disagree with. Um, but in both cases, I'll make the case for both sides because I don't think anything is really wrong with scoring either one either way. It's just some of it's a byproduct of the scoring criteria that we use. Some of it is a byproduct of poor judging. But we will get to that. Okay, so how'd we do prediction wise? 12 and 2. 12 and 2. One of my better, it might be the best. No, I've done 12 and 2 before. UFC 299, I went 12 and 2. Also went 12 and 1 for UFC on ABC 7. Okay. So one of my better ones. Um, this was almost 13 and 1. I really wanted to switch my pick to on Tembo Garimbo and Vicente Luque. The closer we got to that, the more I just kind of went, that experience gap is a real thing. And while I still don't think that Luque is, he got on the mic afterwards and said, I'm back. I'm unconvinced of that based on this was a good win. I'll talk about that when we get to it, I promise. So this was a good win for him, but I don't know that I'm on the, he's completely back train. That one I should have changed my mind on. I didn't. The other one I got wrong. Max Griffin and Michael Chiesa, just got that one wrong. But yeah, could have been if I were operating in a gray area about this, I would have changed my mind on that. But again, maybe should have, but all I have is my integrity on this, and I didn't. So I didn't change my mind between. I didn't. I have an internal process for this. If anything I do change my mind about, which is very rare, like 90% of the time, I'm rocking with what I pick. And if I take L's, I take L's. Like the whole point of this is to get better at it and see how well I do. And if I'm changing my mind all the time to try and pad my numbers out, then it defeats the purpose, and it's a waste of everyone's time. Um, And my internal process for changing my mind on that, I didn't go through for Luque and Garimbo. Once the fight starts, I'm done. I have to live with it. And very quickly into that fight, I went, oh no, Luque's kind of got him. And then very quickly after that, Luque did in fact get him. Just one of those things, and I kind of hemmed and hawed about it last week, but ultimately I'll eat the L. Again, 12-2 instead of 13-1. Oh, boo-hoo me, right? Um, so yeah, there's tell you the other. One of the reasons I can also live with that one being wrong because partially this is a weird thing. There were the decision. I'll address it a little bit here. The decision in the Cyril Gahn and Alexander Volkov fight, I did not agree with. That said, I'm not up in arms over it the way some other people are. Because if you watch round one and round two in isolation, how you're supposed to score them, those are both really close rounds. I didn't give Gahn both of them, but if you tell me you did, I'd have to rewatch the fight to really see if how firmly I disagree with you. Round two, I think in particular, I gave round one to Gahn, and I think that stands in general. Um, Round two seems to have been the swing round for the judges. And look, I gave it to Volkov, but I remember doing it live. Like I said this in my commentary. Like, that's a close round. When you have two close rounds like that, I can't get up in arms over 29-28 either way, no matter how much I disagree. And I do disagree with that one pretty firmly, but getting that prediction right on a bad, more or less bad decision, um, I figure at that point, like, yeah, even, that one was like kind of a little bit counterbalancing out, what I should have done in the other one. As far as the overall stat line goes, like, I'm not talking about like karmic balance or anything here. That would be weird. My karma on predictions would be the least concern of anything going into any of these fights. Um, yeah, so really only those two. Which of those did I feel good about getting right? Choi. You know what? Duho Choi, getting that one right felt good. I'll be honest about that one. I felt pretty darn good about that. I know I wasn't the only guy in the world who picked Choi, but um, yeah, that one felt good. The rest are whatever. As far as like, how do I feel? And fights in particular are differently, but getting a prediction right, it's rare that you feel. It's not rare that you feel good. When you predict everything, there's only a few that like really stand out as, you know what, I feel pretty good, feel pretty vindicated about that. So anyway, like I said 12-2. Be done patting myself on the back. Year to date, that's 350 wins, 147 losses, 4 no contests, one more event to go this year for the UFC. So I'm actually feeling pretty good. um, I would rather. Again, thus far I've only gone negative on 2 cards. I would still like to do better next year. I think I'm going to do this again. Um, yeah, I'm going to do this again. If nothing else, it's just something else to talk about. So that's where we are year to date. Okay, moving on to the fights themselves. In your main event for the UFC flyweight champion, Alexandre Pantoja defeats Kai Asakura via technical submission, chokes the man out with a rear naked choke, 2:05 of the second. This was a fun fight for as long as it lasted. This was a good little 9 minutes of action. Comes out and Asakura is trying to time flying knees for when Pantoja closes distance. In fact, he kind of lands one fairly early. Pantoja dogs through it. Um, Spends a fair amount of time. Lands a couple of good punches. He actually drops Asakura with a left hook along the fence line at one point. Pantoja winds up winning the first. Second round, he hits this sweet back take. He's kind of got the back standing in the clinch. They're against the fence, and he's kind of working the cheese donkey. Or what's the other one I heard it called? The broomstick? Hearing it called the cheese donkey just made me laugh, so that's where it is in my head. It's getting your leg kind of laced between both of your opponents, and then you straighten it out so they have a hard time balancing. He's able to kind of use that off-balance Asakura enough to get him a little bit away from the fence, because he's not really on the back, he's more on the hip. And then just jumps to the back very quickly, gets the body triangle, starts getting the choke, eventually gets it locked in, puts him out. Pantoja, somebody said this on Twitter, on X. I can't remember who you were. I apologize. I retweeted it. But fighting Pantoja has to be just like the physical embodiment of misery. Because he has good cardio. He basically does nothing but pressure. It's rare you get him backing up. Not impossible, but it's rare. And then he starts coming forward again. Very good pressure fighter. He's good in all facets of the game. He's got a cardio base that will let him do this for 5 rounds. And he's almost impossible to hurt. I mean, what do you do with that guy? I mean, Pantoja, when was the last time he was finished? He's never been finished. The only guy who got close to finishing him, Davis and Figueiredo actually did some damage to him when they fought. That was back in 19. And that was Figueiredo like in his big run at flyweight. Figueiredo kind of busted him up in that fight, but couldn't get him out of there. And Figueiredo's power at flyweight was legitimate. He stopped a lot of guys. Then he lost that decision. He beat Matt Schnell. Then he lost that decision to Askarov in 2020. Which I didn't think it was controversial. I agreed that Askarov won. But since then, he beat Manel Kopp, choked out Brandon Royval, choked out Alex Perez, beat Brandon Moreno again for the belt, beat Brandon Royval again to defend the belt, beat Steve Erceg, and now chokes out Kai Asakura. If we go back into his UFC run, like he's that... What do you... I'm not even kidding. Like, what do you do with this guy? Your number one contender is Brandon Royval, who he's beaten twice. That's just kind of where the division is. He's beaten Brandon Moreno 3 times, technically, if you want to count their fight on The Ultimate Fighter. I don't, but... Somebody posted the stat going into this fight, like he's 9-0 against the top 10 of the flyweight division. Or is something like that. Like, let me just bring up the UFC flyweight rankings real fast. So, yeah. Rankings go like this. Royval, Moreno, Albazi, Carla France, Tyra, Perez, Almabayev, Erceg, Koppen, Elliott. He is like 2-0 against Royval, 2-0 against Moreno, hasn't fought Albazi, hasn't fought Carla France, hasn't fought Tyra. He beat Perez. He has beaten almost all those guys. Albazi just had a setback. Tyra just had a setback. Perez is outside of contention. Almabayev is still on the upswing. It's just... What do you do with this guy? He's basically cleaned out that division. I mean, it's so... In his post-fight interview, he said, "Hey, I know you retired, but I'm the featherweight GOAT. If you disagree with me, Demetrius Johnson, come out of retirement and fight me." Like, that's where we are. I mean, and Demetrius laughed it off, and I think his exact words were, I know the quote actually, because he put a video out saying, he says, quote, like, my black ass ain't coming out of retirement. He actually said, like, I'm not the best flyweight in the world. My bank account's good. I'm spending time with my family. I'm good. Um, so here's the thing about this for me personally. Do I think there is an amount of is there a dollar amount that would get Demetrius Johnson out of retirement to fight Alexandre Pantoja? I think there is. I don't think there's any chance in the world the UFC is going to pay it. The UFC wouldn't pay Demetrius Johnson when he was their champion. Like, suddenly they're going to break out the checkbook and really throw a lot of money at him now? No, they're not going to. But it was kind of amusing. And also, it was sort of refreshing to, as part of what Demetrius said. Like, I'm not the best flyweight in the world anymore. You know what? Fair play to you, man. And he's making good money with streaming. He's spending more time with his kids. He's not taking brain damage. I wish him nothing but the best, man. I said this after DJ retired. Like, that is one of the all-time greats. Somebody asked Pantoja who he thinks the best flyweights in UFC history are. He said Demetrius, Cejudo, and then myself. And I don't know why he would put Cejudo ahead of himself. Cejudo's time at flyweight was brief. I don't think he beat Demetrius Johnson in their rematch. Just straight up. I scored that for DJ. I have scored that for DJ every time I've rewatched it. I'm not crying robbery. That's just one of those I really disagree with. Um, and then his only title defense was the emaciated corpse of TJ Dillashaw. Um, which I barely think counts. Then he goes up to bantamweight, and he beat Marlon Moraes, and then he beat TJ, not TJ, then he beat Dominic Cruz. And then he retired. Look, I respect the heck out of Henry Cejudo's combat sports career, especially it includes his wrestling. It is worthy of respect. Who has the better flyweight career, him or Pantoja? At this point, it's Pantoja, and I'm going to be honest, it's not that close. It's really not. Pantoja's body of work in that division is better than Cejudo's. Um, yeah, that's where I stand on that one. Part of the problem with Pantoja, though, he's struggled to. I didn't yell about this. I talked a little bit about this last week. Like, he gets lumped in with this like cadre of, oh, we got so many boring champions, which in and of itself is a non-trivial exaggeration. There's a couple of champions right now who have less than fan-friendly styles. I freely admit that, but they're both new. Like, neither Merab nor Bilal have even had a title defense yet. Let's slow the roll a little bit on that one. Uh, that being said, like I freely admit, like yeah, do I understand why people are not thrilled with their fight style? I do. That makes. I'm not saying you have to be fans. I'm saying extrapolating out that, well, the UFC has a bunch of boring champions from two guys who just became champion is a bit much. It's a bit melodramatic. And then lumping Pantoja in there is flatly wrong. His last four fights have been really good. So knock that off, please. It's going to take a while for him to get out from under the shadow of Demetrius Johnson, assuming he even can. He's about to hit 35, which is a big line, especially at flyweight. I don't even know what you do with him next. do you do Royval again? I mean, here's the thing about flyweight. There's a few fighters still coming up who, a few of them suffered setbacks recently. You know, let's throw Kai Asakura into that mix. He's not as young as guys like Tyra or Almabayev, but are we really going to pretend that one loss to the champion, like, completely derails his career? It just utterly tosses him to the wayside? No. No. That's a bit ridiculous. It is. He didn't even put on a. It's not like he turned in a bad performance here. He landed some good stuff. You got to see a little bit of what he's about. Just Pantoja's a really tall task for anyone in that weight class, and a task no one's been able to overcome in quite a while, in a number of years at this point. So I don't hold that too much against him. You've you've got guys again kind of coming up. Urseg still needs to retool a few things, but he's young enough to fix it. You've got Tatsuro Taira, just suffered a loss to Brandon Royval in a really good fight, actually. And he's clearly got work to do, but he's only in his early to mid 20s. Like, we got time with him. There's no need to panic. You've got Asu Almabayev coming up. That's certainly nothing to sneeze at. He's pretty darn good. The division itself is going to be okay. In the future, we're just in one of those transitional periods where you've got a very good champion. And the guys at top have turned back some of the upcoming guys who maybe got rushed a little bit too much towards the front of the line. Which happens. Look, if we're in the same place a year from now, we can revisit the topic of flyweight's health. But I actually think the division is in an okay spot. You just got a very good champion and some guys near the top who are still also very good. And breaking through that is going to take a concerted effort from whoever's going to do it. But solid win for Pantoja. He hinted a little bit at maybe wanting to move up. I appreciate that sentiment, but bantamweight it doesn't need extra bodies at this point. Bantamweight's pretty good. So it's just got to be whoever's up next. I mean, he tied with like Demetrius Johnson and Joseph Benavidez for most wins in the flyweight division. That was his 13th win in the division. That's a pretty big milestone. So good for him. He is, to my way of thinking, the second best flyweight champion the UFC has had. I think he's surpassed Cejudo. At this point, I do think the series between Moreno and Figueiredo was really good. And I don't take one iota of anything away from that. But Pantoja's body of work at this point is better than either of them as champion at the division. So, good win for him. Like to see what Asakura does next. I don't think there's any reason to be pessimistic about his future in the UFC. Coming in, making your debut, fighting for the belt, big ask. And as I mentioned, in fairness to him, it's not like he came out there and laid an egg. He actually turned in a respectable performance. So I think he'll probably do some work in that division. He might even get back to the title level. I don't think that would not shock me to see him get back there. So yeah, that was your main event. Co-main event, the one that had a lot more people talking. Shavkat Rakhmonov defeats Ian Garry via unanimous decision, 48-47 across the boards. I was 49-46, but the third round going to Garry, I think, is fine. Might even be more correct than what I did. So Garry wins 3 and 5. Some interesting takeaways from this one. Shavkat Rakhmonov has some I'm not going to call them bad decision-making skills. but there's a you can kind of see why he made some of the choices he made, but he didn't go to his wrestling until the fourth round. Now, he was trying clinching in his upper body stuff, especially against the fence, a lot in the first three, and just couldn't really find it. A lot of the rounds were spent there. He wins the first two rounds largely based on landing a couple of better punches out in space. Third round, which is the round that everyone else kind of gave to Garry, Garry was able to avoid most clinching, do better clinch breaking, and kind of get more of his striking game going. Ian Garry actually has, in general, pretty good defense. Some of that's the fact that he's very tall for the weight class, and that lets him get away with certain things. It also gets him clipped on occasion, but his lead leg is also very dexterous and very fast. He's got good hand speed. He doesn't have a tremendous power. I don't think he has bad power, but he relies more on timing than committing his weight to punches, which is okay. Like, that's a choice. And I'm not saying right or wrong. But if that is your choice, it's going to mitigate some of the power you're able to generate. It will stop you from getting out of position more often because you're not committing your weight to it. So, again, trade-offs. Neither of these are right or wrong. This is an observation about his style and the choices he makes. He's really good about making people fight the way that Ian Garry wants to fight. And a lot of that is like suppression of volume, suppression of output. I said this, Volkanovski also. I'm obviously not at all the same caliber fighter at the moment, but Volkanovski's another guy who that is one of his supreme gifts as a fighter. He manages fights very, very well. I mean, he held Max Holloway across 3 fights to some of the lowest output of Max's career. Like, that's not an accident. You do that to Max Holloway, it's because you know what you're doing in those circumstances. And Garry does something very similar in terms of like suppressing a lot of what's going on, slowing it down, making it be on some of his terms. When Rakhmonov went to the wrestling, when he actually like shot low, had more success. One of the things he did though in the 5th round, tried the same takedown he hit earlier, which is a lateral dump. Similar to a knee tap, but a knee tap usually has an underhook. So you're under the arm on one side, other side taps the knee, either lifts it or just gets it off unstable, tips him over that way. If you are not under the arm, but you're over the arm, kind of trying to grab the head, it's a lat drop. Not drop, lat dump. Lateral drops are different. He tried that a second time. The problem with that is especially if you're like trying to get around the head with one arm to force them the direction you want them to go, they can duck under that and get your back, and that's exactly what Ian Garry did. Couple of things about Garry's ground game in this. His guard work is largely defensive. In fact, he did a lot of body triangle work from the bottom. That's normally a way to just kind of concede position and concede the round. He tried to hit the body triangle sweep. There's a way to do that. It requires some absurd core strength and very good timing. He almost got it against the fence. Couldn't quite finish it. Who was that? Anderson Silva hit one of those in Pride. I can't remember who he did it to. Was it Carlos Newton? Forgive me, I don't remember which one. I know he did it. Because I remember the commentary being like, well, he's, going with the body triangle from guard. That's a little bit weird. And then very soon to that being said, he's able to hit that body triangle kind of sweep and get on top and mount. Rio Chonin? I mean, he lost the Rio Chonin fight ultimately. He didn't have a ton of Pride fights, so it's one of those. Forgive me, I can't remember. Garry almost hit it, couldn't quite finish it. Shavkat was able to block it. The fence kind of worked in Gary's favor in terms of trying to finish it, but he couldn't quite get there. Gary nearly gets a choke in the fifth round. His rear naked choke finish leaves a little bit to be desired. He almost got one of his other fights as MVP. He had MVP's back for a good chunk of that fight, similar to this one, and just couldn't. There's some finishing details to his rear naked choke game that just needs some refining because he probably should have been able to find against MVP. I'm fairly certain he should have been able to find that one. Um, but it's not like he's doing it. Again, we're talking like refinement. We're not talking the man doesn't know how to choke you out. He clearly knows how to do that, but little details at the higher end of things matter a lot more. And there's just some of those that need refine, which is hardly the end of the world. Um, Ultimately, coming out of this, Shavkat did not look like he's looked in the past. This was his first fight in his career that's gone the distance. A lot of people being higher on Garry coming out of this with some good reason. I think, despite the loss, this was, I think, his best performance. He showed a lot of skill across a lot of different areas of the game, and uh, definitely, especially to do this on short notice, that's nothing to be. Despite the loss, nothing to hang his head about. He seems to have taken it very well. In fact, after the fight, I made him look human. I still think he actually said, I think he won. I agree that he won the fight, but who got closer to finishing? Hey, Garry did. That's true. Uh, so, cause for optimism there. Rakhmonov needs coming out of this. He's going to get the next title fight, right? This was supposed to be him and Belal Muhammad. It's going to be him and Belal Muhammad. Muhammad, especially if he's like trying to pressure forward and do kind of what he did to Leon Edwards, that will leave some openings for Rakhmonov to work. Rakhmonov really wants you to engage him offense with offense. And that is just where he excels. And fair play to him, that has worked out for him. But as the level of competition increases, that's going to be less and less viable. And some of his choices maybe need to be reevaluated, or if he'd gone to his wrestling earlier, might he have been able to find more success? Because when he's able to actually get his offense going, it is devastating. I don't think he ever badly hurt Garry here, but he marked him up a little bit. And he definitely had the bigger offensive flurries in terms of the striking. It's just when you're fighting someone who is going to be committed to their defense, he's going to struggle to get things to open up the way he wants. It also does need to be said at this point, he's not defensively. I don't think his defense is bad, because that's not. The problem is not that his defense is bad. The problem is that he is not responsible with it. And those are two very different things. His aggression, he's not completely recklessly aggressive. I've seen a lot of reckless fighters. He's not reckless in the traditional sense. But if you ask me tactically, his concern is his offense, and his defense is a secondary consideration. And that could be a problem. So he loses a little bit of steam coming out of this. Not a lot. He still won. And needs to be said that he was also preparing to fight Belal Muhammad. Belal Muhammad is definitively not Ian Garry in terms of in any way, shape, form, or fashion. Dude, Muhammad came into the cage after this to do a little bit of a stare down. Was respectful, both of them, but like Bilal's in shoes, Shavkat's barefoot, and Shavkat is still like noticeably bigger. Gary's technically taller than I think he had an inch on Rakhmonov. Some of what Rakhmonov was going from fighting a shorter, cardio-based, mostly pressure-oriented wrestler to fighting a very tall, lanky, quick, movement-based counterpuncher. Like, there's a lot that he was doing in camp that just was not necessarily applicable. So if Gary and Rakhmonov meet again in the future, I don't expect it to look a lot like this fight. I expect both of them will make very different decisions. Um, so yeah, that's where we are with that. I might still lean Shavkat over Muhammad coming out of this, but a lot closer. In fact, I imagine odds for this would now flip to being Bilal Muhammad favored. And frankly, I don't think that's unfair. All right, moving on. Oh, geez. Cyril Gane defeats Alexander Volkov via split decision, 29-28. This fight sucked. Let me start there. It's weird because in a lot of ways, this is like, oh, this was a perfectly respectable heavyweight fight. It also wasn't very good. So for the judges, the swing round was round 2. Gane gets the first. The striking from Volkov wasn't quite as effective as it would be in the later rounds. There's a couple of takedowns in there for Gane, if memory serves. Like it's okay. It's his round, not by a huge margin, but okay. Round 2 was close, goes back and forth. Volkov had a couple of flurries there. His body kick was working okay. But again, there's a takedown in there, and I think that's the round where Gane like sat back for the straight ankle lock or the heel hook, and bad decision. Third round very clearly goes to Volkov, gets the best of stuff on the feet, gets on top, and Gane spends a giant chunk of that round in half guard, holding kind of a Kimura, which is just stalling. There was a period in that exchange when he nearly has. I'm trying to remember which leg it was. Again, it's from half guard, so it's his open leg. I think it was his left. He almost got that like all the way around the back of Volkov to pivot over for an armbar. And that situation could have developed into something dangerous. But then after Volkov gets his head through that, and it's clearly not, then he's just holding the Kimura to stall things out. Gane gets the decision. He didn't think he won. Here's my I don't think he won either. But my thing on this, you have to. The second round is the one that swings it for the judges. Rewatch that round. I'm not saying I scored it for Volkov. I'm not saying I'm not saying that. That there's some secret like great case for Cyril Gane. I'm saying that round is very, very close. I might have to rewatch this fight to see if I agree that I still think it was close, but in real time it felt close. And when you get fights like that where you have 2 close rounds, you kind of just have to go, okay, so how unlikely is it that 2 judges gave fighter A those 2 rounds when one of them I think he won legitimately. I think Gane won the first round. Fair and square. So what do we do with the second? Rewatch it. It's close. It's not a great round, but it is not definitive to me that Volkov won that round convincingly. I did give it to him, and I do think he won the fight. And he wins the third round clearly, and the third round is the clearest round of the fight, and it always sucks. It's always worse. when the guy who wins the only clear round loses the fight. That always feels worse. And I, it just sucks. I think Volkov won. Cyril Gane has gotten worse. His movement is not quite as effective. His striking output has diminished. He's making very, very poor decisions in his grappling. I mean, dropping back for that footlock again, just... Then holding the Kimura forever. I mean, it wasn't even really close. There was a point when it was kind of close to him transitioning to an armbar. Like, the athletic potential was there for that to have switched around and gotten very dangerous for Volkov. That danger, the danger of that position lasted about 5 to 10 seconds, which can be a long time in grappling. Like, we're taking a minute here, like, how dicey can this get? Once Volkov addressed that and that threat was no longer in play, then things just were stalled. He fights like a guy, not just grappling, but grappling in particular. He grapples like a guy who tends to roll with people not as good as him, who he's able to catch with some of these slightly gimmicky things because he's big and he's athletic and he's strong. And that's a bad way to train. It's a bad way to go into fights. I really think he needs a change of scenery. I don't know that he's going to, but at this point, and let me be clear about something too. Like, I don't know for sure that it's his coach doing him dirty. The best coach in the world can only do so much with you dependent upon your commitment to what's going on. If he's half-assing it in training, like, there's nothing to be done about that. It doesn't matter who he's training with. I don't care who you think the best coach in the world is. Put him with the best coach in the world. If he's half-assing it, then you're not going to change anything. The sort of question is, like, could the best coach in the world convince him, motivate him, etc., to not half-ass it? And, well, that is a whole other kettle of fish, isn't it? Yeah. I think there was cause for him to not be, like, super down on himself after the loss to Francis Ngannou. In fact, doing it live, I scored that fight for him because I thought he actually did enough to maybe have squeaked out the fifth. Not up in arms over that going to Ngannou. That's a big whatever. That was just kind of my thoughts on it live. The Tuivasa fight was, I mean, he got dropped, but mostly that was a good performance from him. The John Jones fight should have been a wake-up call. Like, when you lost that badly, and that was a horror. Like, I'm not trying to pick on Cyril Gane here. Like, anybody who comes out and does that badly, you need to have a pretty serious conversation with yourself. And then he gets kind of a rebound against Sergey Spivak, but that's a little bit whatever. His current level of training and motivation and everything that's gone into it will actually get him to beat guys like Sergey Spivak because he's big and he's strong and he's athletic. But there comes a point when your lack of growth and your lack of hard work starts to manifest against guys you can't just kind of run over by being the better athlete. And he really needed to have had that kind of come to Jesus moment earlier. Again, I don't know that a change of scenery would do him any good because some of this is going to be on him. But I do think at this point there are some questions to be asked about whether or not Fernan Lopez is maximizing the talent at his disposal. I would like to see Gane try his hand somewhere else, even if it's not permanent, even if it's just a little bit. Like, go explore. try out a few other places. I don't know that he will, but whatever he's doing now, like it is not, his skill set is not working anymore. People have started to figure him out, and he's making poor decisions consistently. So, yeah, sucks for Volkov. This might have been his last real push. Um, Everybody seems to think he won. I think almost all the media scored it for him. Dana White thought he got screwed. A lot of people thought he should have won. Hey, I'm gonna raise my hand and say, yeah, I scored it for him. Clearly, I think he should have won. So we'll see what happens to him coming off of this kind of a loss. It might not be as damaging as it could be, because, I mean, what are you going to do with Gane? Like, you're going to throw him back into the title picture? No. I mean, the title picture right now is still trying to figure out what John Jones and Tom Aspinall are going to do. And even if you don't want to deal, and, Volkov already lost to Aspinall convincingly. We've already seen Volkov in Blades. Like, Gane in Blades actually makes more sense at this point, and I think that goes very poorly for Gane. Yeah, again, not a great fight. Featherweight, Bryce Mitchell defeated Kron Gracie via knockout, slam and elbows, 39 seconds of the third round. This fight also was not very good. Should not have been on the main card. Movsar Evloev and Aljamain Sterling buried on the prelims actually was a really good fight. This was kind of a joke. There was a lot of guard pulling from Gracie and then not a lot of guard work. There was some armbar stuff, worked a little bit in the second, but not much. And then he tries to jump guard in the third, and Mitchell gets the forearm under the chin, slams him down, couple of elbows. All she wrote, nothing to see here. Opening the main card, Doo-Ho Choi. A lot of guys wrote him off. He beats Nate Landwehr via TKO, elbows and punches, stuff from the mounted crucifix. 321 to the third. Choi came out very quickly and very quickly got Nate Landwehr on his heels. Landed the lead left uppercut because Landwehr uses a high guard. Couple of other punches, a few bodies, just enough to get Landwehr to break the momentum. Because Landwehr likes to get out and get going quickly. Choi let him taste the power, got him thinking about it, got him to like, whoa, hang on. From there, just superior boxing from Choi, good takedowns. Mounted crucifix. He just beat him everywhere, man. Doo-Ho Choi just beat Nate Landwehr everywhere. Really solid performance from the Korean Superboy. So my hat's off to him for this one. He looked good. He really did. On the prelims, Dominic Reyes defeated Anthony Smith via TKO, punches, elbows, stuff like that. 4:46 of the second. This was hard to watch, if I'm being honest. So Anthony Smith, during fight week, mentioned that he took this fight as a way of processing grief. His best friend passed away fairly somewhat suddenly recently, and he said, like, I don't even care about winning, I just want to get in there and fight, and that's a bad mindset if you're gonna go in there and fight. He said after the fight, like, this is probably his last one. He doesn't want to make a rash decision, but probably. I think that would be for the best. Reyes looked okay, but I have to grade this on a curve because Anthony Smith was... At one point, Anthony Smith dropped his hands and told Reyes to hit him. Like, not doing the, like, taunting thing, like, okay, let's fight. Like, no, just, like, hit me, I want to feel something. Fist fighting to deal with emotional grief that is not what you're supposed to be doing with that. And I get that it can help. Elements of training can help, but I would not want to go into a fight with that mental headspace personally. Yeah. Vicente Luque stops Temba Garimbo 52 seconds of the first round with a beautiful anaconda choke. Technical submission. Very quickly. Luque he's moving pretty good. Lands a short right hand that drops Garimbo. Garimbo tries to scramble up. And Luque has a very, very good front headlock sequence. not Darce. Again, Anaconda choke. Well, he has a good Darce as well. Again, the whole series from the front headlock. Yeah, Anaconda choke, Gator roll, puts him to sleep. Luque says, "Yeah, I'm back. I'm going to need to see more evidence of that, but uh, if he was going to make that claim, he needed this kind of a performance." So, good win for him. At featherweight, this did not win fight of the night. There was no fight of the night, actually, and that's some BS. Movsar Evloev defeats Aljamain Sterling via unanimous decision, 29-28 across the board. This was a really good fight. It's not going to make my fight of the year list or anything, but the scrambling, the wrestling from these two, oh my goodness, some wonderful back takes. Just watch this fight if you like grappling. Like MMA grappling. Beautiful stuff. Largely the scoring on this one comes down to control versus damage. Aljamain Sterling would have control. Actually, he had the back in a couple of different positions, but he didn't do a whole lot with it. And Evloev's actual control of Sterling was a little bit more sporadic, didn't quite have control as long, but he made a point to do damage. He made a point to land leg kicks, or knees, he made a point to land ground and pound. And it was enough to get, and it's not like he got out wrestled apart from a few moments. Like, he held his own. This was a really good fight. Look this one up this is worth your time. Really good stuff here. I don't think Evloev gets the next title shot. You've still got, I know he beat Diego Lopez, but Diego Lopez has done better stuff more consistently since then. We might still be looking at a Topuria-Volkanovski rematch. There's just a few things up in the air. You could throw him in there with Ilia Topuria, and I think you'd get a heck of a fight. Evloev gets kind of dogged because he hasn't finished anyone in the UFC, and don't get me wrong, I understand that. But watch this, and you can't. There's a difference between being boring and not being able to finish, and just not being able to find finishes. A lot of Evloev's stuff, it's more been, he's putting in the work. He's just had trouble finding the finish. I'm not going to hold, not finishing Aljamain Sterling against him. Who has he fought that I think he should have been able to finish? Take a quick look at, like, Sung Woo Choi. I'd have to rewatch the fight, but that one he might have been able to find something. I'm not going to hold, like, not being able to finish some of these people. Like, couldn't finish Nick Lentz. Nick Lentz is hard to finish, especially if you grapple with him. Not impossible, just hard. Dan Ige is hard to finish. Diego Lopez is hard to finish. Arnold Allen's hard to... I mean, for crying out loud, like, Max couldn't finish Arnold Allen. I'm going to get upset about, Movsar Evloev not finishing Arnold Allen? No, I'm not. Really good fight. Next up, Brian Battle gets a split decision over Randy Brown. Battle missed weight, weighed 175 for this, so second time he's missed weight. He weighed 173 for an earlier UFC fight. He needs to get that dialed in, or he needs to move up in weight. 29-28 either way is fine. Brown takes the first. Battle gets a little bit of a slow start, and the hand speed differential was notable in favor of Brown. But second and third, Battle turns it into a little bit more of a dogfight, gets a little bit more of the dirty boxing going, keeps Brown pinned on the fence for longer, and his clinch fighting is actually pretty good. It's not great, but if he's got you there, he's not just holding you. He is, like, uppercutting you and hitting you to the body and landing elbows. Like, he does work in the clinch. So, again, you go 29-28 either way, and I'm not complaining about it, so... Next up, Eric Anders defeated Chris Weidman via TKO punches, 4:51 of the second. I actually thought Weidman won the first. He got dropped with a kind of a head kick, actually, in the first round, but he rallied back and then dropped Anders late. The problem is that he just ran out of steam. Anders was able to... He kept clinching with Weidman. I thought, kind of, what are you doing there, man? By the time the second round starts coming around, I see a little bit what he's doing. He starts being able to punch into it a little bit more effectively, but he's just trying to kind of wear the 40-year-old guy out, and he did. Got a takedown on Weidman in the second, and then spent a little bit too long, in my opinion, just landing punches. Weidman off of his back here was just... It was in half guard. There was a bit of time when he was trying, but Anders was able to either cross face him or keep him flat, and then Anders' ground and pound was not like earth-shattering here. In fact, if he'd been able to put a little bit more on it, he would have stopped this sooner. But Weidman just, at a certain point, just didn't have anything from down there. Yeah, Weidman needs to not fight anymore. I understand him wanting to come back after the broken leg. Actually, I completely understand that. Then he loses the fight with Brad Tavares. But he made it back to the cage. He maybe should have let that one go there. Then he fights Bruno Silva, and he actually looks okay. Bruno Silva kind of hanging on for dear life in the UFC, and there's a bunch of eye pokes that complicate things. But he should have taken that win and kind of rode off, because this is not getting any better for him. Flyweight Joshua Van defeated Cody Durden via unanimous decision, 29-28, 30-26, and 30-27. I was 29-27. I do think Durden won the first round, but Durden spent way too much energy trying to wrestle in the first. And I said in the preview to this one that he's got some gas tank issues at flyweight. He fights a very taxing style. Second round rolls around and Van starts rolling downhill. Good combination punching, body work. Hit. How Cody Durden never fell down, I don't understand. He is incredibly tough. But he took an inadvisable amount of punishment here. Third round, I think, was the one I went 10-8. Just more of the same from Van. Van had the setback against Charles Johnson, but he's kind of rebounded from that, and that dude's a handful at flyweight. Welterweight Michael Chiesa submitted Max Griffin with a rear naked choke, 156 to the third. Chiesa's striking still leaves a lot to be desired, but Griffin is a little bit gun-shy. And once Chiesa is able to get a hold of you, his wrestling is still pretty solid. His back work is pretty good, and that's a lot of what we got here. A lightweight, Chase Hooper armbarred Clay Guida, 341 of the first. Beautiful armbar by Chase Hooper. Look this up. Some wonderful detail work. Chase Hooper looks pretty solid here, and I have no love lost for Clay Guida. And kicking everything off, Kennedy Nzechukwu defeated Łukasz Drewski, via TKO punches, 451 of the first round. Not a whole lot here. Kennedy Nzechukwu at heavyweight actually looks pretty good. He's had 2 fights there, 2 really solid outings. That weight cut to 205 for him must have been fairly significant because he looks like he's filling out nicely at heavyweight. So that was it. Again, there was no fight of the night, which I think is I would have easily given Sterling and Evloev the check for that. But your performances went to Alexandre Pantoja, Vicente Luque, Chase Hooper, and Kennedy Nzechukwu. I'm not going to try and take money out of any of their pockets, but personally, I would have given, who would I have cut from that? Nzechukwu, he's the easy one to cut from that. I don't mean that to diminish his performance, but like, you ask me to take away 2 of those so I get a fight of the night in there. Nzechukwu, probably Luque would be the next one on the chopping block. Chopping between Luque and Hooper is a little bit of pick your poison there. But those 2, some combination of those, Kennedy and then either Luque or Hooper, to give Sterling and Evloev fight of the night would have been how I did that. But I'm not in charge of that, so just take that for what it's worth. Full report, MMAZone411mania.com. Y'all know where to find that. So give it a read. That is always appreciated. All right, how are we doing on time? Well, last week was a shorter episode, so we are where we are this week. All right, moving on. UFC on ESPN 63. This will be the last UFC event of the year, and it's been a year, hasn't it? Uh, Save my year in review stuff for a little bit, but that's kind of where we are on that one. Okay. Main event was supposed to be Joaquin Buckley and Ian Machado Garry. That got switched around because obviously Garry was moved to replace Bilal Muhammad. So instead, our main event, the last fight any of us will watch for the UFC in 2024, Colby Covington and Joaquin Buckley. I'm not even going to clown on it. I actually appreciate, this is going to sound weird, I actually appreciate Colby doing this on somewhat short notice. That said, this is a really kind of tough matchup for him at this point. Buckley is athletic, very capable of dealing damage. It's a decent step up for Buckley. He's coming off the win over Stephen Thompson. He actually had some struggles with Stephen Thompson. Now, granted, Covington doesn't fight any way similarly to how Thompson does. But this is 5 rounds, and Buckley hasn't had a 5-round fight, ever. So that does bear noting. But Buckley is on a, 5-fight winning streak. Andre Fialho, Alex Morono, Vicente Luque. He's undefeated since moving back to welterweight. So yeah, that's 5-0 in the division. Whereas Covington, coming off that weird loss to Leon Edwards, I mean, he shouldn't have had that title shot to begin with. It's going to be about a year. It was December of 23. But his last 3 losses, 2 of them are to Kamaru Usman, and frankly, I did score that second Usman fight for Covington. And then Leon Edwards, so, champions. But, I mean, he beat Tyron Woodley. That's nothing to sneeze at, even in 2020. The Masvidal fight was just kind of what it was. Not very interesting. I mean, most of his wins are over guys no longer on the roster. Masvidal's retired, Woodley's retired, or at least out of the UFC. Lawler's retired. RDA's still there and still kicking around. Damian Maia's retired. I don't know. So I have no problem picking Buckley here, but what are the odds on this, actually? I know they're with Buckley. I'm just curious about how much. Get Colby at plus 225. I think that's about right. If you have questions about Buckley's cardio, or if I don't know. I'm not going to be surprised if Colby Covington wins the fight. Let me just put it like that. Not going to surprise me. There's a few things about Buckley's game that I think he could exploit. I don't know if he's still in the place physically and mentally to be able to do so. So that's where I am with that. But again, if you don't mind taking a flyer, if you're looking for value on the underdogs, I actually don't think that's bad value on Colby. Again, I wouldn't bet on MMA to begin with, but I can see ways for him to win this fight. Let me just put it that way. I favor Buckley, younger, more athletic, more knockout, more danger pose. I favor him, and I favor him clearly. But I don't think this is I don't think it's a blowout, and I think the odds are about right. Okay, let's see. Featherweight, Cub Swanson and Billy Quarantillo. That's actually a fun fight. Killer Cub, bless him, been doing this since the year of the flood. I mean, his pro debut was in 04. He's been doing this over 20 years. It was July of 04. He's So yeah, he's like 20 and a half into this. Coming off a split decision loss to Andre Fili. You could have scored that for him. I can't remember if I did or not. Beat Hakeem Dawodu before that. And Billy Q. Coming off a loss to Yusuf Zalal. He's been trading wins and losses for a bit here. Gavin Tucker, Gabriel Benitez, Shane Burgos, Alexander Hernandez, Edson Barboza, Damon Jackson, and then Yusuf Zalal. This should be Quarantillo, logically. Look, as I mentioned, man, I have nothing but respect for Swanson, but he's 41. And he's he's not just 41, he's like 41 with some miles on that man. Odds are slightly with Quarantillo, minus 150. That tracks for me. I'm just trying to think if I'm going to want to take a shot on Swanson here. There was a time I would have. There really was, and I don't know that I'm there anymore with Cub Swanson. So I will go with Billy Q. Not by a lot. And that's going to be one of those I reserve the right to change my mind on a little bit. I need to see a few things during fight week from both of them before I really solidify that. Flyweights next, Manel Kopp and Bruno Da Silva. Not a bad fight here. So Bruno on a 4-fight winning streak, all finishes, all performances of the night. Jeez. I mean, I think the only okay. So he's been escalating. He comes in, loses to David Dvorak, then loses to Tagir Ulanbekov. Then beats J.P. Bays, beats Victor Rodriguez, beats Tyson Nam, and beats Cody Durden. And you know what? That is a respectable stretch. It really is. Kopp is coming off of a weird loss to Muhammad Makayev. He'd won 4 in a row before that. And frankly, I don't remember how I scored that fight with Makayev, but it was another very like unimpressive outing for Makayev, where there is some skill that man has. Really does need to be said, but there's a good chunk of stuff that he just kind of floats by on rather than developed. My hunch is Kopp, not because I dislike Da Silva. I don't. Or I think does he go by Silva? And Kopp is prone to weird fights, man. He really is, but I think he's in general kind of sorted himself out lately, and I think he's absolutely a guy that could be in the title picture. I mean, I know Pantoja's already beaten him in the past, but that was kind of a split. Was that split? I know it was a decision. It was unanimous. Okay. Geez, that was Kopp's debut. Kopp's UFC debut was Alexandre Pantoja. That's a big ask. It wasn't the greatest fight in the world. I wouldn't hate a rematch at this point. Let me just put it like that. Let's see. Light heavyweight next because of, oh, jeez. Vitor Petrino and Dustin Jacoby. Petrino's coming off of that loss to Anthony Smith. That's not a good loss for you at this point in your career, my man. Whereas Jacoby also coming off a loss, I think. Oh, geez, he's 1-4 in his last 5. Yeah, that's a rough spot. Split decision loss to Khalil Roundtree. Lost to Azamat Mirzakhanov. Beat Kennedy Chukwu. That was actually a solid performance from him. Lost to Alonzo Menifield. He should have won. When I say he should have won that fight, I don't mean the judges got it wrong. I mean, if you look at how he was fighting in that fight, he made some very odd decisions in the 3rd round that cost him. By most rights, he should have been able to win that fight. And then got stopped by Dominic Reyes the last time out. So Jacoby might be a little bit past it. Petrino, though, man, you lose to Anthony Smith in 2024 like this. That is troubling. I still think I'm going to lean Petrino, but he needs to rebound here in a big way. Because that loss to Anthony Smith is going to be glaring. Bantamweight, Adrian Yanez and Daniel Marcos. That's actually a pretty good fight. Yanez had a bit of a rough patch. Had a really good streak going and then got stopped by Rob Font in his step up. Then he got TKO'd by leg kicks against Jonathan Martinez, suffered a bit of a knee injury in that. Came back, beat Vinicius Salvador's last time out. That was a pretty solid rebound. And now he's facing Daniel Marcos, who I actually think fairly highly of. Marcos 16-0-1. He has a no contest in there with Richie Long. Yeah, Marcos is actually pretty good. So this is a solid fight. I'm still going to go with Yanez, I think. Odds are with Marcos. I like Marcos. Hang on. Why are we thinking Marcos? Because Yanez has struggled with leg kicks, and that's a lot of Marcos' offense is very kick-based, very kick-heavy. Do I think that Yanez will still have that problem? Do I think Marcos is going to be able to capitalize on it the way someone like Jonathan Martinez did? I haven't picked an underdog yet. And you know what? I have no qualms about picking Yanez as an underdog here. I understand Marcos. I can understand Marcos being the favorite. I like Marcos a lot. This is a good fight. It's a really good fight. Marcos, I don't think he's as powerful a kicker as Martinez, and part of what made Martinez's strategy work was how hard he kicks. I don't know that Marcos can replicate that. And frankly, if Yanez hasn't addressed some of his leg kick issues, then if he loses here, that's going to be, in the same way, that's going to be a real problem. And kicking off the main card, for some reason, at light heavyweight, Navajo Sterling and Tuco Tocos. Let me have a look at these two gentlemen. So Sterling is 5-0, comes out of New Zealand. This is his UFC debut, coming off a Contender Series win. Because, of course, hang on, let me clean that up a little bit. Okay, and Tuco, 10-4, lost his UFC debut to Umar Sy. The writing in the tea leaves would tell me they want Sterling to win. And the odds, they agree with that one, so yeah, I will go with Sterling. Weird fight to have on the main card. Especially given some of the prelims. That's a really weird fight to have on the main card. Anyway, prelims. Michael Johnson and Otman Azaitar. Michael Johnson's still kicking around. He beat Darius Flowers his last time out. That's not nothing. Got knocked out by Carlos Diego Ferreira before that. I mean, the man hasn't won back-to-back fights since 2018 when he got a split decision over Andre Fili and then beat Artem Lobov. He lost to Clay Guida in 2021. I don't even know what to say about that. Azaitar, not exactly in the best place. Lost to Matt Frivola in 22. Lost to Francisco Prado in 23. He's been out of action since then, so that's a year and a half. I think I am gonna pick Michael Johnson here. I am. I'm gonna feel. There's a non-trivial chance I wind up feeling very, very stupid. But that's where I am at the moment. Lightweight, this should be on the main card. You ask me to put the fight that's the main the hot opener for the main card. Joel Alvarez and Drakkar Klose. That's what I would put as the as the opener there. Joel Alvarez has only lost in the UFC to Demiris Magulov and then Arman Saryukian. Has wins. So his overall UFC record is 7-2. 6-2, sorry. Most recently, back-to-back wins over Mark Chikazi and Elvis Brenner. Actually, I think pretty decently of Alvarez. Ditto Drakkar Klose. Close on a 4-fight winning streak. Brandon Jenkins, Rafa Garcia, Joe Selecki, Joaquim Silva. In fact, he is somewhat impressively 7-1 in his last 8. The only loss was that out of nowhere war he had with Beneil Dariush, where he got knocked out in the second round. That's a really good fight, actually. That's what I would open the card with, personally. I've kind of been on the Alvarez bandwagon for a minute. Not like future champion, but a guy who I don't think gets the respect he deserves. I'm going to go with Alvarez here. Not by a lot. I actually think the odds are a little bit lopsided here. They're fairly heavy with... odds are like -3... Somewhere between 375 and 330 for Alvarez. Getting like +300 or like +295 on Klose, that's a decent value bet. Featherweight, Sean Woodson and Fernando Padilla. So Woodson hasn't lost since he fought Julian Erosa in 2020. There's a draw in there with Luis Saldana. Most recently wins over Dennis. His last 3 wins are Dennis Bazukia, Charles Jourdain. That was a split decision that should not have been split. Woodson won that, I thought, fairly clearly. And then Alex Caceres. Padilla. Let's have a look at Mr. Padilla. He's been in the UFC for a little bit. He's 16-5. Little bit might be an exaggeration. 2-1 in the UFC. Wins over Julian Erosa and Luis Pajuelo. Those are those sandwich a loss to Kyle Nelson. So nothing to be ashamed of there, but yeah, I don't have a problem going with Woodson here. I do think fairly highly of Sean Woodson. How big a favorite is he? On the odds here. The odds have that respectably close. You know what? Fair play. Again, I'm not trying to badmouth Padilla at all. And Woodson can occasionally fight in weird ways. All right, featherweight next, Miles Johns and Felipe Lima. I need to have a look at Lima here because he is 13-1. 13-fight winning streak. Got a good win in his UFC debut over Muhammad Naimov. I remember being moderately impressed with that. So he is no one to take lightly. On the other side, we have, again, Mr. Johns, who hasn't lost since 2022 when he fought John Castaneda. Most recently, his last couple of wins over Cody Gibson and Dan Argueta. The Douglas Silva de Andrade win was pretty solid for Johns. That does need to be acknowledged. Odds are with Lima. I can see that. Am I going to go? Let me go with not Johns. Let me go with Lima. I'll trust the odds on that one. Let's see. Women's flyweight. We have Miranda Maverick and Jamie Lynn Horth. You know, Maverick had some potential at one point. Her development kind of plateaued, though. She's a decent favorite here. 3.5 to 1, give or take. Quick look at. Horth is 2-1 in the UFC. Lost a split decision. Won against Haley Cowan. Lost a split decision to Veronica Hardy. Won a split decision against Ivana Petrovic. Actually, I remember. I seem to recall scoring that fight for Petrovic. Yeah, that was just last month. I scored that for. I don't think it was wrong to score it for Horth, but that was not my read on it. No problem going with Maverick on this one. Okay, next up, Davy Grant and Ramon Taveras. Have a quick look at old Davy Grant here. He's had some ups and downs in the UFC. He's been there for a minute. Like, his technical UFC debut was 2013. He just took 3 years to come back for his second fight. Didn't he choke out? Yeah, he choked out Rafael Assunção with that inverted triangle choke in last year. Lost a split decision to Daniel Marcos in July of last year. He's been out for a minute. Okay. I respect Davy Grant, so have a look at Taveras. 10-2. Won his UFC debut in a split decision over Sherry City back in January. I feel pretty okay picking Grant here. Odds are actually with Taveras. I'm okay picking Grant. I don't mind picking a couple of underdogs, and I might be misreading that, but I'm gonna go with Grant. And kicking everything off, we have Josephine Lindgren Knudsen. She is 8-0, 2-0 in the UFC, wins over Marta Mann and Julia Pilastri. So nothing really to write home about. And Piero Rodriguez is 9-2. 2-2 in the UFC, won her first two against Kay Hansen and Sam Hughes, lost to Jillian Robertson, and then got disqualified against Ariane Carnelose for headbutting. I remember that. She was winning that fight, too. No reason for her to have been that dumb. Yeah, because she should have known better. I have no problem with what the ref did there. The odds are with Knudsen. I'll trust the odds on this one. Not a whole lot, but for the moment, I'll trust them. All right, and that is how we have it, sitting as things stand. So, Saturday, MMAZona411mania.com, last UFC event of 2024. I will be covering it live. Hope you all tune in for that. Okay. So let's jump into the fight announcements that we have had over the last little bit. So let's start with UFC 311. That's been finalized over the last little bit. So this will be January 18th in Inglewood, California at the Intuit Dome, which is apparently a nice venue. So we have the full card. Main card is as follows. Main event, Merab Dvalishvili. Co-main event. Main event, Islam Makhachev and Arman Tsarukyan for the lightweight title. Good fight. I think Tsarukyan can make it interesting, but I still like Makhachev there. Co-main event, Merab Dvalishvili and Umar Nurmagomedov. No problem with that. The correct fight to make. Tend to lean Nurmagomedov. I'm gonna have to type out Nurmagomedov a lot in that fight because I am not. I can only control C one of them, and I actually have an easier time typing out Nurmagomedov than I do Dvalishvili. I've typed out Nurmagomedov a lot over the years, so that one's actually a little bit easier. It actually flows, whereas that many V's, no. At lightweight on the main card still, we have Beneil Dariush and Renato Moicano. Big thumbs up. Light heavyweight, Yuri Prochazka and Jamal Hill. I I don't like to talk about fighter stunts very often because it doesn't matter. But Jamal Hill over the last few weeks, I haven't talked about it until now, started being a bit more aggressive in the social media space. You know what? And you know what? Fair enough. You're a fighter. You have to market yourself. You have to market what's going on. Make noise. That's fine. I don't really care. But this last week, he and Alex Pereira were both at the UFC PI, and Jamal Hill walked over to Pereira, who'd been doing some training, and did we're not on Twitter now, what are you going to do? There's guys you can do that to, and there's guys you can't do that to. Because Pereira, who'd already been working, had a little bit of a sweat going on, has gloves on. I don't know if he'd been sparring or just doing pad work or what, but been working. Picks up a nearby pair of gloves, tosses them at Jamal Hill, and then says, fine, put them on, let's go. And Jamal Hill backs down. And like he did the well, why do we need gloves thing? Like, you know why you need gloves. And then to get on the on the old internets after the fact and go, I get paid to put on gloves and fight. I'm not going to do it with you for free. Then what were you doing there? You showed up to get into a confrontation for internet clout. That's it. That's all you did. I'm not even mad at you for it, but that's all you did. Then, because you picked one of the guys who's just going to say, sure, let's go, you then you don't have an exit strategy. You expected him to mouth off back at you. You'd do a little bit of the jawing back and forth. Few other people who are in the room are going to get between you and push you apart, and you'd have something nice to show you'd have something nice to post on your YouTube channel, and you can talk about it. That was the plan. The fact that the guy just gave you gloves, said, there's a cage, let's spar, it blew up in your face. You don't have a way to backpedal. This blew up in your face. Full stop. So anyway, him and Yuri Prochazka, okay, Prochazka had mentioned after his last fight that he might have been looking at moving to middleweight. I don't think a weight class change is not going to solve his problems. I actually don't know which way I'm leaning in that fight. Out of curiosity, hang on, do we have odds for that? I mean, I know we do, but let me just... Odds are actually a little bit with Prochazka. Okay. I can see that, believe it or not. I've got to do a little bit of tape study on both of those guys, and I'm not making a prediction here. I'm just curious. And kicking off the main card on that one, you have Kevin Holland and Rainier de Ritter. That is a great fight. No notes. Rest of this card, Johnny Walker, Bogdan Guskov is whatever. Peyton Talbot and Hani Barcelos, that's good. Gelson Almeida, Sergey Spivak is meh, because it's heavyweight. What else do we got? Grant Dawson and Carlos Diego Ferreira is fine. Rinya Nakamura and Muin Gafurov is a good fight. And for some reason, you've got to throw crappy heavyweights on the, high on the prelims, while curtain jerking, you have two good flyweights in Tegurul Bekov and Clayton Carpenter. Okay. What are we doing here? This is why you can't get traction at flyweight, because whoever puts these cards together would rather throw meathead heavyweights in positions of prominence instead of flyweights. So anyway, UFC 311, main card, almost no notes. That's a really, really good pay-per-view. UFC 312 got announced as well. This will be February 9th in Sydney, Australia. Your main event, we don't have the full card for this one. We do have some fights. So we have the top two at a bare minimum. Main event, rematch for the middleweight title, Dricus du Plessis and Sean Strickland. Not my preferred direction for this, but I'm not going to pitch a fit. I didn't hate their first fight. I think Hamzat is more deserving personally, but because what he did to Robert Whittaker is better than anything Strickland's done recently. But it's who was available on the schedule in the geographic location that the UFC was working with. That's kind of how this broke down. Because I don't know that Khamzat Chimaev can fight in Australia. I don't know who all still has sanctions against Kadyrov. Your co-main event for that pay-per-view for the strawweight title will be Zhang Weili defending against Tatiana Suarez. There was a time I would have picked Suarez very easily in this fight. But Suarez fought twice in 23. One of those was at flyweight, and she did not. She got the finish over Montana De La Rosa, but that fight exposed that a lot of what she does really relies on a size differential being in her favor at strawweight. Then she beat Jessica Andrade, which was, very solid. But this woman has missed large swaths of her career for injuries, especially neck-related issues. I don't know what to do at this point because she was supposed to fight. Actually, UFC 310. She was supposed to fight Virna Jandiroba, and she had some kind of a health issue and had to pull out. And now is getting a title fight. Okay. Look, she's a very good wrestler and she's a very good fighter, so I'm not here saying that someone's getting screwed over this because I don't know that there's a more deserving contender in line at the moment that Zhang hasn't already beaten. So, but that's just kind of where we are. Also, what we do have on that card, none of these are going to be, this is a pay-per-view, so none of these are going to be main card fights, but Anshul Jubilee is back. That'll probably go poorly. Ray Sarudia and Stuart Nickel. Actually, that's not too bad. And Jimmy Crute and Marcin Prachnio will be a little bit of a, let's say like a little bit of a donk fest. But, that one could be moderately fun. So that's where we are again. That full card, we'll have to wait for a while before it comes out, but that's where we are at the moment. And it's, you know what? It is not the worst thing I've ever seen. So, yeah, those are the recent fight announcements. The January 11th card, we don't have a full bout order for. We're back in the Apex, God help us all. Main event of Mackenzie Dern and Amanda Ribas 2. This is not a very good card. Hang on, let me find good stuff here. Okay, Chris Curtis and Roman Kopylov is good. That is no notes. That's a good fight. I'm moderately interested in Nurulo Aliyev. I don't care about light heavyweights. Man, there are more people without Wikipedia entries than with on this card. Oh, look, Ihor Potieria is fighting. This is a bad card. Okay, I'm just going to say this is a bad card. As it stands right now on paper, there's like 2-ish good fights. This is a poor card. This is a very poor card to start the year for 2025. Oi, I am not looking forward to that one. At all. Ugh. Alright. Let me run through social media real fast, see if anything crazy is broken. If not, we will do plugs and get out of here. Okay, you know what? Last thing on this. I'll be brief. So, some member of the press at UFC 310 actually did ask Dana White about Conor McGregor. And Dana did an impressive job of avoiding everything. Said nothing about the actual situation and says if Conor's going to fight for us, it'll be late 25. No comment on what actually happened, no comment on anything. Frankly, at this point, I am genuinely surprised somebody asked. None of the major MMA news sites, what passes for news sites these days, they're not. They're just aggregation. They're just content aggregation. It actually even mentioned what he said in the. It's the state of MMA media is gross, sad, and pathetic. That's on that depressing note. Let's close up shop here, shall we? So what do I got for plugs this week? Monday, we will be reviewing Wicked over on Damn You Hollywood. It's going to be me, Mark Radulich, Alexis Haina. I think Mick Wanamaker was going to join us. Let me double check my calendar here. Yeah, and Shay Tate might be there as well, so we might have a full house, which will be somewhat beneficial if I have nothing to say, and I might have nothing to say. I'll just be honest about it. I haven't seen it yet, but not. I am so far away from that movie's intended audience, it's not even funny. Thursday, I will be part of a triple feature that will be Strange Darlings, Cuckoo, and the Substance. So we are just tackling a handful of, more horror-adjacent films. So, yeah, tune in for that one. And we will be, yeah, that's what I got. So then WWE SmackDown on Friday, last UFC event of the year on Saturday, and we will be back here next. We'll be back here next week. Hang on, I gotta look at the calendar now. Yeah, 16th. Yeah. Okay, so next week we will review UFC on ESPN 63. Then the next UFC event is the 11th. Right? Yeah, so. Okay, we will have a show on the 16th. We will not on the 23rd. We will not on the 30th. We will on the 6th. So the 6th I will do my 2024 year in review stuff as well as preview the first UFC. Okay, so we're going to have the 23rd and the 30th off. Both in relative proximity to the major holidays at that time of year. So, okay. All right, that's what it's going to look like. I will see y'all next week. Until then, thank you for listening. I appreciate the heck out of you. Y'all know that. Enjoy the holiday season. Stay safe out there and continue to be well, be safe, and behave.